So I think the sector generally it's been a tough last 6 months economically in Nigeria. We hit a high point in December with the financial close of the Azura project, which essentially was the first greenfield IPP that had closed probably in the last 10 years in the country. So I think, Mr. Waziri, to start off with you, what are your views on where we've got to as a sector and where we might move to in the medium term?
Thank you very much, Shola. I was reading the headlines today in Nigerian newspapers, and one of the catching titles was "Paralysis Grips Power Sector in Nigeria." The power sector today is truly, as you mentioned, going through very trying times. At the core of the current challenges is the drop in generation that we've witnessed in the last 6 months. We came down from a high of about 5,400 megawatts to about 1,900 today. That to me is the biggest challenge. And as we all know, the single biggest reason why we've dropped is nothing more than the disruptions to gas supply, the gas network. It's not a technical issue, it's political. And we all know that the most difficult issues to deal with are not the technical, straightforward issues to be dealt with, but the political aspect, the softer challenges, the soft skills, as they put. So that to me is the biggest challenge. And of course, we all know about the adjustment to the Naira exchange rate that happened within this week. I think that is also has introduced a new angle to it. Immediately, even before the minor tariff review that is going to come up within the next few months, I think there will be an immediate impact on the pricing of gas, which is currently priced at about $3.20 and is priced at $199. That will immediately go up by another 30–40%. So ultimately, consumers are going to be faced with this challenge. All of us, the entire financial sustainability and bankability of the entire value chain is at risk now. And it behoves on all of us to work very closely and in a cooperative manner to be able to solve. It's not going to be just a discourse or GENCO's or MBT's call to solve this. A regulator has just moved backwards. I don't know why he did that. He is at the core of solving this. And I don't want to take further time. I will let other speakers.
Thanks for that. David, with Azura closing in December and a lot of participants in the sector expecting momentum to go through, you've heard an analysis of where we are now. What's your assessment? What's your take? And where do you think this industry is headed in the short term?
I suppose my views are very similar to Waziri's and that of everybody else in the sector. So I'm deeply disappointed by what's happened the last 6 months. I was very optimistic last year. So the last 6 months of 2015 I thought were fantastic from a power sector perspective. Power generation increased in a very positive way, and by the end of the year we were doing a fairly steady 4,300, 4,400 megawatt hours per hour. And that has collapsed in the last 6 months for the reasons which Waziri has just outlined for us. Am I pessimistic in the medium to long run? Not at all. Do I think that there are some valuable silver linings to what we are experiencing at the moment? Yes, I do. Just to give you a small example, the supplier of gas to our project, so when we reach commercial operations, which will be in 2018, we'll be receiving gas from Seplat, which is an indigenous marginal field operator that's been very successful in Nigeria. They have gone through a difficult time, as have all the gas suppliers, the last few months, and they've reacted very well. They've been very innovative in the way in which they've looked at ways of decoupling their production of gas and condensate from crude exports. So their production at the Oben gas plant went from 300 million scuffs a day, which they had increased to in the past 2 years very rapidly, and that went down to 0 after the interruption of the Transfocados pipeline. And through a number of initiatives which they've undertaken, they've managed to get that back up to 230, 240 million scuffs a day. And they've discovered routes of getting the condensate out which they wouldn't have discovered had they not been shock tested. So my heart goes out to them. I sympathize with them. But selfishly, I'm glad that this shock happened now, because it means that by the time we get to commercial operations, they will have very substantially decoupled their gas production from crude oil exports. So there are some silver linings to what's happening now. In the oil and gas sector, people are taking some hard decisions which were deferred, and they were deferred again and again, and we can no longer defer those decisions. So I'm bullish, very bullish, about the medium term, and medium term for me means 18 months from today onwards. I think things could get, I don't think things will get worse the next 6 months, but I think they could remain pretty tough until the end of this year and through into next year. But I think a lot of the hard decisions that we've deferred, I think we are now taking, and I think the benefits of that will be reaped in 2017 and 2018.
Okay, thank you. Dolapo, I don't know whether you have anything to add to what's been said already?
A few thoughts. I think we've been structurally, for the market, for the Nigerian power sector, there has been some very, very significant progress. The things that are happening now are what I term as externalities, because they were not caused by the power sector. They were things that affect the power sector as is affecting the rest of the world, and which we've got to deal with. But in terms of progress that has been made in the power sector right now, just a few things to touch on. We've now finally have what is as close as possible to cost-reflective tariff. I say as close as possible because it will probably never be perfect for investors. And this has been a long journey. This time last year, I wasn't at this session, but I was at AEF. We didn't have a tariff. We had a tariff that was less collection losses and was mounting huge shortfalls every month. So that's one thing from a structural perspective for this market, which would make it great for when David comes on board, for example, hopefully in a market that already has a tariff that hopefully works. Second thing is, which Mr. Bintubi, I don't know why he didn't mention it, but I will mention it for him. MBED finally has issued LCs to generation companies. It is history in Nigeria that our bulk trader has actually structured something that actually issues LCs to generation companies. I wouldn't say it's a totally perfect situation, but it's a lot of progress. And I would say that it is the start of having a contracts-based market across the value chain, because we now have gas suppliers who are actually activating their contracts as we speak. So in a market where we haven't had gas supply being definite and you being able to call on a gas supply contract, I think that's progress. Downsides, what are the challenges that we face, quite apart from the two that have been highlighted, which are very, very big issues? There's still a huge issue of liquidity in the system, which is that the distribution companies are largely still illiquid. There have been a huge amount of shortfalls, and whilst the tariff somewhat mentions the fact that these shortfalls would be recovered, it's not very clear how they will be. So it will be interesting to see how things play out. There's been an intervention facility, whether that would morph into something else. There's been talk about different things, which I won't talk about. So that's a huge issue that we still need to deal with for when Azura comes on stream, for example, for them to be able to be sure that they will get their revenues and get paid on time. It's had a spiral effect on gas suppliers. It's had a spiral effect on generation companies who can't keep up with an O&M cost because they haven't been getting paid. But I like David, see a silver lining. I am still quite positive and still quite bullish that we will get over our externalities. Our government just needs to find a way, God helping them with wisdom for how to deal with their vendors. And I think with the foreign exchange issue, I think CBN is seeing some light. So hopefully, we'll be very. The regulator, okay, is behind, but it's been interesting to see how we deal with the foreign exchange issues in our tariffs. So I'll leave it there, but I say I'm still positive.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about some of the things that keep investors awake at night. Developers, equity guys like ourselves, lenders. And I think very close to the top of the list at the moment is currency. Is it realistic that we expect this industry to be fully dollarized? And if not, what can we do about it? I think in that context, looking at extending the involvement of local financing, which is properly structured. If I could ask Belén from IFC, what is IFC thinking or doing anything about or with products to extend tenors for local banks or to enhance those facilities to bring the cost down? Is that in your thought profile?
Absolutely. I think that local currency funding is a topic that is extremely dear to our hearts at IFC. We look at it from the risk profile of the projects, as well as the benefit that it brings to the sector, as well as the off-taker and the government at large. And that is something where we have applied our minds in the past extensively. And probably IFC is one of the leading DFIs when it comes to actually local currency funding in the market. But we haven't figured it out. So let me preface that it's work in progress.
And with the pension funds, given that there's,
So we work, so basically it's a multi-pronged approach. Okay. IFC, for instance, is one of the leading issuers of bonds in local markets that then we use to fund our own projects. So I don't know if you know that actually in Nigeria, we were the first non-resident issuer of a bond in Nigeria, in Naira. We were also the first AAA issuer of a bond in the market. But the amounts that you can raise in that function are still somewhat limited. And the maturities that we were able to reach with our first issuance, it was 5 years. But for us, so for infrastructure, is still not a very good match. But we continue, and we have actually now a license to continue back to the market and continue to issue and raise Naira that we will plan to invest as a lender in our projects. We also, in the point that you raised with pension funds, I mean, typically we see them playing mostly on the equity side more than in the debt. And in the debt, the biggest constraint is their inability to take construction risk. Right. But we have developed a product that allows us to basically wrap ourselves the construction risk and then pass on only the operational risk to the pension fund. That's a concept that we're testing right now in infrastructure projects in Latin America, and if successful, we will seek how to roll out. But you have partial credit guarantees, partial risk guarantees that go towards the extending of maturities and helping local banks fund, and we operate in the swap market. So to the extent that you have a swap market that has enough depth to actually play, we would do it, and we would use that as a vehicle for us to fund our projects. Now, this goes to say that having a sort of the currency situation that we have, for instance, in Nigeria in the last few months, is clearly not conducive to apply these instruments in the market. So it's not only limiting the financing or limiting.
Is that an issue? What do you need? Liquidity or?
Correct.
Okay.
So basically,
volatility is fine. You just want to be able to.
In a market, so if you want to go and tap the swap market, but basically the swap market for dollar naira had dried up in recent months, it doesn't allow us to play. Now, if you go back into the market, if you have a floating currency and you have visibility as to how that market is going to evolve, people would be willing to trade in the swap market, particularly with an IFC with a AAA rated balance sheet. So we are able to strike, I mean, in countries like in India, we're able to do swaps for up to 20-year maturities, and then we pass that on into our lending.
Yep.
So helping and working on our side as well with local banks to actually develop those markets so that eventually the rest of the economy benefits,
Yep.
and more importantly, the infrastructure sector, which is always a critical piece of it, is something that is very much in our thinking.
Okay.
So as you can see, multiple pronged approach, guarantees, swaps, bonds, issuance, etc.
Okay.
But work in progress.
Okay.
Now, we have also to remember that the investment needs of Nigeria in the power sector are tremendously large.
Sure.
So we need to help the market sort of tap different types of financing. So local currency will be a part, sort of the greater the portion of local currency, the better. But we need to bear in mind that for a long time, we're still going to have significant dollar funding, and the sector needs to be able to accommodate that.
Okay.